Hello everyone, today we are going to learn about English literature. What is English literature? So, generally speaking, literature refers to all books, poems, essays, and short stories. However, it can also be used to refer specifically to work of greater artistic merit. The term is flexible and can be applied in various ways. So, literature is a general term for written works, including novels, short stories, poems, and essays. This study of English literature looks at all of the most important works written in English over the centuries. So, this literature has developed over more than 1,000 years. The earliest known work of English literature is Old English poem Beowulf. Since then, literature has developed and diversed. So we'll start from Old English literature. So before English evolved into its modern form, it was actually so different or that contemporary English speakers could not possibly understand it. This language is called Old English, and it is in Old English that the earliest works of English literature were written. So the earliest surviving work of English literature is a poem called Beowulf that was probably first written in around 700. Through it probably existed as an oral form much longer. There are many different periods of Old English. It can be 700 to 1150 CE, and it can also be shown in on the screen. So because literacy rates were low and stories were often passed down orally, Beowulf's lines are alliterative to make them more memorable. It is unknown who wrote Beowulf, but it is thought that the earliest surviving version was either written or heavily uh, edited by some monks. Other notable works of English literature include Sedmon's Hymn and The Dream of Rood. So after Old English, we have to know about Middle English. Middle English was a midway point between Old English and contemporary English. While it is still quite different from the English that most people are familiar with today, it is most or less readable for contemporary English readers. At this point in Britain, the common people were speaking Middle English, but the nobility mostly spoke French. For that reason, as well as low literacy rates, few works or English literature were produced for some time. The most notable author of this time period is Geoffrey Chaucer. His time period was 3040 to 14,000. So Chaucer was a poet who defined tradition by writing his works in Middle English instead of French. So his magnum opus was the Canterbury Tales, a series of stories told in verse about a group of people in a pilgrimage together. The stories are at once amusing and moralizing. His work looked like this: the life so brief, the art so long in the learning, the attempt so hard, the conquest so sharp, the fearful joy that ever slips away so quickly. By all this I mean love, which so solely astounds my feeling with its wondrous operation, that when I think upon it, I scarce know whether I wake or sleep. English Renaissance literature 1485 to 1660. The term Renaissance means revival or rebirth. It was a movement that swept across Europe over the course of several centuries. It was a time of social change where people's lives were altered by urbanization and advancements. Shakespeare authored at least 38 plays and 154 sonnets during his career. By far most influential writer of this period is William Shakespeare. His time is 1564 to 1616. So while Shakespeare was extremely influential, there were many other English Renaissance writers of including Sir Thomas Waite, John Donne, Christopher Marlowe, Edmund Spenser, and Francis Bacon. So these are some important writers that you should learn and note down. Many of the major forms of English poetry and literature were developed during this time, and all of these writers are still widely read today. Next one is English Restoration literature. As you all know, the learning leading to a period in English history called the Restoration. So its time period is 1660 to 1750. Other important details you can note down. The Neoclassical Period in English literature, also known as Neoclassical Age, lasted from 1660 to 1798. It's divided into three parts: Restoration Period, Augustan Period, the Age of Johnson. During the time, writers tried to imitate the style of Greeks and Romans. Neoclassical literature was typically rational, measured, and followed strict formal structures. So that's all about it. So the next is Romantic Period in English literature. It is very important. So the Romantic period of English literature is taken to begin with the publication of Wordsworth in Coleridge's Liefeld Ballads and with the death of novelist Sir Walter Scott. No other period in English literature displays more variety in style. Romantic writer emphasizes emotion, nature, and they showed individualism and imagination over reason. So the notable romantic poets were William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and John Keats. So you have to remember all the important poets of all the periods. So the next period is very important and one of the most important periods in English literature that you have to study and to overgo with is the Victorian period. So the Victorian period of literature roughly coincide with the years that Queen Victoria ruled Great Britain and its empire. During this era, Britain was transformed from a predominantly rural agricultural society into an urban industrial one. New technology like railroads and the steam printing press united Britons both physically and intellectually. The working class women and people of color were agitating for the right to vote, rule themselves. Reformers fought for safe workplaces. Poetry. Poetry was one of the most popular genres of the Victorian period. The romantic poets, particularly William Wordsworth, so Elizabethan Barrett Browning's Orren Lake, an entire novel written in verse, Christian Rossetti, Golden Market. Victorian poets developed a new form of dramatic monologue in which speaker recites the substance of poem to an audience within the poem itself. Robert Browning's My Last Duchess, in which the Duke of Ferrara describes how he killed his last wife to the man who is arranging his next marriage, is one of the most famous examples of a dramatic monologue. Alfred Lord Tennyson also used the form Ulysses, in which Ulysses recounts his reasons for setting out on a last voyage to the man with whom he will sail. Next we have is the modern period from 1901 to 1939. So as you can see, modern age is totally opposite from Victorian age, believed in rational thinking. So the modern era, which is generally considered to have begun around 15,000, here are some important writers which you have to note down of modern era. So the last one is postmodernism, that is a literary period that followed modernism in 1960s and 1970s. So it is mainly characterized by metification and self-reflectivity. Here are some important writers and works that literature includes in this postmodern term. As we conclude our journey through the rich and diverse history of English literature, let's take a moment to reflect on the remarkable evolution we have explored. From the epic tales of Beowulf and the profound works of Chaucer to the revolutionary plays of Shakespeare and the novelists of the Victorian era, each period has left an indelible mark on the literary landscape. We have seen the literature not only reflects the society of its time but also influences and shapes the thoughts and cultures of generations to come. The romantic poets, the modernist innovations and contemporary voices of all contribute to a dynamic and ever-evolving tradition. As we look towards the future, we can only imagine what new stories will be told and what new voices will emerge. The beauty of literature is that it is always the fix, always growing, and always reflecting the human experience in profound and unexpected ways. So, thank you for joining me on this literary journey. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your fellow literature enthusiasts, and don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the world of books. Feel free to leave a comment below about your favorite period or author in English literature, or any thoughts you have on the future of literary works. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep reading, and keep the love for literature alive. Thank you for watching this video.